whoever has not watched Wajiha's Dastaangoi story, you have to go on YouTube and watch it. I think it's one of my favorite stories that have been told thus far on our live session. So thank you for that, Wajiha. And to kind of start off, I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your journey from what you've studied and how you got into music to begin with.
Thank you, Ahmad, for having me again on your platform. And I've really enjoyed my session that I did the first time. So it's happy to be back and chatting with you. I think I've always been interested in music ever since I was a young child. If I look at my earliest report cards, they all say she's extremely fond of singing and dancing. And of course, I mean, that's something that's inherent in all children, right? But I think music was something that continued to like tug at my heartstrings throughout my life. And so in high school, I think I figured that I have some semblance of a voice. या जिसे कहते हैं कि थोड़ा अंदाजा हुआ कि सुर में मैं गा सकती हूँ या रिदम की एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग है तो I started performing at school concerts. I picked up the guitar. I learned the guitar. In college I went to LUMS. I did my undergraduate degree there. So that's also where I was actively involved in the underground sort of music space there. Would perform at concerts there very regularly. Again at LUMS, it's a business school, but that's where my economics padhne gayi thi. But it is there where I discovered my love and interest in cultural anthropology. So music or जिसे कहते हैं ना कि आपकी पढ़ाई education was always somehow seen as separate things.
Yeah.
तो मैं अभी भी ये सोचती हूँ in retrospect कि कभी भी हमें आप अपने पैशन को और अपने करियर चॉइस को एक जैसा कभी नहीं आप अमूमन देखा जाता है ना आप कहते हैं कि हाँ म्यूजिक है बट बेटा वो साइड पे करना वो आपकी हॉबी है
Exactly.
वो आपकी हॉबी है तो आपको उस तरह से परस्यू करना है एंड ऑफ कोर्स यू नो म्यूजिक का ये कि मेरी फैमिली में कोई इस तरह से पब्लिकली म्यूजिक इस तरह परस्यू नहीं करता या प्रोफेशनली नहीं किया तो उस तरफ कभी दिमाग गया नहीं कि यू नो आई वांट टू बिकम अ फुल टाइम परफॉर्मिंग आर्टिस्ट ऑफ कोर्स देयर आर लाइक सॉर्ट ऑफ taboos also associated with the entertainment industry and of course they're also changing and a lot of women before our times and since forever have been challenging those sort of norms तो इवन जब मैं अपनी एंथ्रोपोलॉजी डिग्री जो है वो ले रही थी तो उधर भी आई नोटिस्ड कि आई वाज रियली इंटरेस्टेड इन ऑल दीज कॉन्वर्सेशंस एंड टॉपिक्स दैट सराउंडेड our South Asian identity and culture and Pakistani identity and culture, right? So I wanted to learn about myself, my land, my region through its music and its poetry and its literature and its history. And so even the courses that I did, I would just navigate towards that. And then I went on to do a graduate degree at NYU. And I did my postgrad in the anthropology of sacred music, for instance. So wahan pe bhi mera जो thesis था वो सूफी म्यूजिक फेस्टिवल्स पे था फॉर इंस्टेंस तो एक तरफ तो मेरी मौसीकी की एक ट्रेनिंग या जिसे कहते हैं कि शौक मेरा पैशन चल रहा था बट साथ साथ में मैं उसको इवन एज अ पॉइंट ऑफ research interest उसको भी explore कर रही थी कि why is it that certain types of music are performed in certain cultures, for instance, right? What's the history? What's the context? So these things really fascinated me.
And I love that, right? क्योंकि ज़्यादातर लोगों को या तो शौक होता है गाने का, but they don't go into the deep kind of nature of understanding where like the etymology of some of the stuff that goes around music. And like you said, कि क्यों गा रहे हैं, कहाँ से गा रहे हैं, जो सुर की बात हो रही है, ये सुर कहाँ से आ रहा है, what are the connotations in whether it be religion or culture, historically the reference करते हैं, which is something that not, I haven't seen that many people kind of have that knowledge or have that curiosity as well, right? Because it's a separate layer where you really start to go and start to research the deep kind of underpinnings of where music and the cultural narrative comes from, because it really does affect, right? Like jo aapne jo baat Dastaangoi mein bhi kari thi, like how there are a lot of synchronicities in religion and religious texts, and how we say certain things, and those are tonalities, and वो गाने के ही किस्म की चीजें बातें होती हैं, है ना?
Exactly. बिल्कुल,
And
बिल्कुल.
it's so fascinating to add that lens to music, to something that isn't like people would consider entertainment, but it's really not. There are so many deeper roots to understanding it. And to
जी,
kind of bring this back to Coke Studio, I think Coke Studio has also done a beautiful job since inception to get
absolutely.
this more front and center, because of the fusion, because of the bringing of the worlds, and because of the way that Rohel has experimented with production, the way that different kinds of people have come together, and it just, to me, it's just fascinating
Yeah,
to be able to go and understand historical references through the lens of Mosiki and through music, especially in
बिल्कुल.
a culture like Southeast Asia, जहाँ पे हमारा like base ही इस पे है काफी अरसे से, right? It's so
जी,
deeply rooted in our culture. So
बिल्कुल. तो आई थिंक आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा एंड आई थिंक कोक स्टूडियो शायद एज अ प्लेटफॉर्म ही आई थिंक जब वो निकला था आई वाज इन कॉलेज आल्सो एट द टाइम एंड आई वाज वेरी fascinated by it because एक तो someone who's grown up mostly even the songs that I would sing were mostly Western songs, right? बट एकदम से आई हर्ड दिस साउंड जिसमें फोक म्यूजिक बज रहा है और अगेन Misha and Arif Lohar paired
yeah,
together, and they suddenly look super cool and super edgy. And obviously हम एक तरह के बर्गर एक बच्चे जिनको कहते हैं उनको इस तरह का एक साउंड कभी सुनने को मिला
सुनने को
नहीं,
नहीं
और
मिलता
ऊपर
है,
से उसकी फिर एक पोएट्री और इसकी शायरी और वो बड़ी गहरी बातें जिसका
इंतहाई.
हमारी हजार सेंचुरी से जो है हमारे ही रीजन का हिस्सा रहा है, और हमने उनको कभी सुना नहीं, ना हमने स्कूल में पढ़ा, ना हमें घर पे सिखाया जाता है, ना हम अपनी लैंग्वेजेस को अच्छी तरह पहचानते हैं. सो फॉर इंस्टेंस इफ आई लुक एट इवन माय केस, मतलब माय फादर्स was Urdu speaking and my mother is Hindko speaking, and half her family is also Pathan. तो मतलब कभी अप्रिशिएट ही नहीं किया ना कि ये मुख्तलिफ लैंग्वेजेस ही हैं जो इस रीजन को और निखारती हैं, उनको संवारती हैं. हम सिर्फ अंग्रेजी के पीछे क्यों जाते गए, या हम
Yeah,
सिर्फ उर्दू के भी पीछे क्यों जाते गए, हमने और अपनी लोकल लैंग्वेजेस को क्यों नहीं किया. तो मैं अपनी अम्मी से भी पूछती हूँ कि आपने मुझे क्यों नहीं सिखाई, बिकॉज शी स्पीक्स हिंदको स्टिल with her
oh
whole
wow,
family, but we don't speak that. And of course now I have developed an understanding and I can also speak it. I'm not very fluent, but I would always ask her कि why are these things not prized in our culture. So these were questions. Of course you're in college, तो आपका एक identity crisis सा
जी.
भी चल रहा होता है. फिर कोक स्टूडियो ने इस तरह की conversations शुरू कर दी और वो मौसीकी के थ्रू, तो it just blew my mind as well.
इस जैसे आप ये बात करी थी, something that came up in my mind was again one of the things that you said in your talk, which was आपके जो उस्ताद ने रऊफ सामी ने जो एक बात करी थी आपसे कि साउथ एशिया इज अ गुलदस्ता of cultures,
जी,
and
उनके
that's
फादर ने की थी.
अच्छा,
जी,
सातामी ने
सात
की थी,
सामी ने. जी, जी,
and it's such a beautiful saying. Like अगर आप
बिल्कुल,
इसको unpack करें कि South Asia is a गुलदस्ता
बिल्कुल,
of cultures, like it truly is. Like सिंध को
बिल्कुल,
ही देख लें, आपके सिंध में
बिल्कुल.
कितने cultures, कितनी languages, कितने historical references, and all of these different things
जी,
that exist. It's just, it's
हाँ.
incredible. लेकिन we do
It's
have the
like a fruit
tendency.
basket, ना? Like a fruit basket जो हम सजा के शादियों पे लेके जाते हैं, जिसमें हर तरह की मिठाइयाँ हैं, हर
जी,
तरह के fruits हैं, and it's lovely. And we're it's so rich in culture and tradition, but we don't know about even half of them. Even within Sindh, we don't know half the languages that are spoken. Marwari hai, to आपकी एक सराइकी बेल्ट है, तो आपकी सिंध में भी और कितनी मुख्तलिफ टाइप्स ऑफ डायलेक्ट्स बोली जाती हैं. एक महाजिर कम्युनिटी भी
जी,
रहती है. So it's just it's fascinating, but unfortunately a lot to learn more about.
completely. And it's just, it's lovely for platforms like these to exist, जो front and center लेकर आते हैं ऐसे किस्म के dialogues, which
जी,
like for instance in this season bringing the rabab and the sitar as an instrument that is like, consistently there, जो ज़्यादातर
जी
नहीं होते. That's again, like,
जी
it starts to question and starts to bring
yeah.
another narrative of how can we look at these things differently, and it's such an
और
incredible
ये ऑफ
thing.
कोर्स रोहेल का एक इट वाज हिज इनक्रेडिबल सॉर्ट ऑफ आइडिया, वो यही जिस तरह वो इसमें भी मेरे गाने पे उन्होंने ये लिखी भी थी बात इन हिज प्रोड्यूसर्स नोट्स के हम सितार और रबाब को क्यों नहीं एक एक रेगुलर फीचर ऑफ ए लोकल बैंड बना सकते,
Yeah,
जिस तरह गिटार होता है तो उस तरह से व्हाई डोंट, एंड ऑफ कोर्स देयर आर बैंड्स इन आवर म्यूजिक, खुमारियां भी है और
जी,
भी बैंड्स हैं जो इनकॉर्पोरेट करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं ट्रेडिशनल इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स को, बट दिस इज नॉट द नॉर्म, राइट? सो
completely.
एंड अगेन दिस इज ऑल्सो अ मात, आई वुड ऑल्सो से कि इवन वेस्टर्न म्यूजिक जो हम लोग करने की अटेम्प्ट करते हैं, इसमें कोई बुरी बात नहीं है, तो ये भी कहना कि वो यहाँ पे अंग्रेजी में क्यों गाते हैं या इंग्लिश म्यूजिक होना ही नहीं चाहिए, इसको भी मैं इससे भी बिल्कुल इत्तेफाक नहीं करती, बिकॉज हम लोग का एक रहा है ब्रिटिश का कॉलोनियल पीरियड, तो जाहिर है हम लोग हैं कॉलोनियल सब्जेक्ट्स, दैट्स अ रियलिटी,
Yeah,
और हम में से कुछ पे वो असर रहा है, तो हम लोग अगर एक सर्टन बर्गर क्राउड है, तो अब उनकी इसमें मतलब ऑब्वियसली वो एक उस एनवायरनमेंट में बड़े हैं, तो शायद उनको एक यही चीज समझ में आती है, बात होनी चाहिए टू ब्रॉडन द होराइजन एंड वाइडन द पर्सपेक्टिव,
exactly.
नॉट टू
It's that
लिमिट इट.
exactly like that widening and not limiting and being able to go forward with conversations. And ज़्यादातर लोग जो है ना ढल देते हैं कि भाई नहीं, ये गोरा मेंटालिटी है, ये कोई और मेंटालिटी है. But it's good to be able to incorporate, क्योंकि आपकी जो younger generation, जो अगली generation है, they are gonna,
जी
like my nieces, like our iPad generation and like iPhones, that's the first
एग्जैक्टली
thing that they know. You
बिल्कुल
can't say that no, ये तो allow ही नहीं है, because उनका future उसके अंदर है. So
जी
you shunning them, like I'm just giving this analogy, but like you shunning them
जी
away
जी
from those products and those technological devices makes them
जी
not ready for the future. And that's the same
जी
thing
बिल्कुल.
in music as well and in culture as well. कि आप चीजें रख नहीं सकते. Like you just take what you have and you go forward.
और कल्चर का भी यही है ना कि वो कभी एक जैसा नहीं रहता,
Yeah,
it keeps changing, it keeps evolving, it's never static, right? So what, for instance, your parents culture was, that's not probably the same, or my parents is not the same as maybe our children's,
completely.
the culture that they, of course foundation एक रहती है, एक traditional values, core values कुछ रहते हैं, but उसके ऊपर चीजें जो है, अब हम हमें देखें, हम like I'm dressed in, यहाँ पे भी पाकिस्तान में भी लड़के जीन्स भी पहनते हैं, लड़के भी पहनते हैं, चले आप लड़कियों को छोड़ दें, लड़के भी पहनते हैं. आई मीन ट्रेडिशनली हमारा नेशनल ड्रेस इज समथिंग एल्स, बट वो पहनते हैं, तो
Yeah,
इसका मतलब है कि जाहिर है वो भी हमारे कल्चर का हिस्सा ही हो गया है, राइट?
exactly.
इसका ये मतलब तो नहीं है कि वो नहीं है. जिस तरह या आप बाहर फॉर इंस्टेंस आपकी अपब्रिंगिंग हुई है, आप मगर आपका जो पर्सपेक्टिव है वो एक बड़ा यूनिक है, एज समवन हु इज Pakistani born but maybe raised in the UAE,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
तो तो वो hyphenated जो identities हैं, उन उनका भी एक अपना कल्चर है, and they add a lot of perspective to this, right? It can't be
completely.
कि पाकिस्तानी एक ही तरह के होते हैं. भाई यूएई में भी पाकिस्तानीज हैं, अमेरिका में भी हैं, पूरी दुनिया में हैं, और वो सब जो हैं कंट्रीब्यूट करते हैं टू अ पाकिस्तानी कल्चर.
And it becomes bigger and big, and that
एग्जैक्टली.
evolution, I mean, actually the evolution I want to kind of take into your own journey is, again, for just a second, because I agree, because usi evolution se hum aage badhte hain, usi evolution se we become
जी
richer as a culture, as a nation, as a
बिल्कुल
people.
बिल्कुल.
Now in yourself, agar aap apne andar dekhein, before we get to the song, um, what is the evolution that you've seen in yourself as a musician since you started on your path learning classical music professionally, with an ustad who can teach you the technicalities and who can give you the perspectives around, because I'm sure that wo jo baatein karte honge aapse, those are just as valuable as the teachings um, that you get.
बिल्कुल. I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. Um, आई थिंक मैंने प्रोफेशनली गाना कभी सीखा नहीं अप अंटिल 4 years ago. और मैं आई थिंक बहुत अरसे से एक तलाश में थी एक टीचर के. जाहिर है मैं शौक था मुझे गाने का, और मैंने मतलब शौकीन हूँ गाने सुनने के का भी, तो मैंने दुनिया का मैं हर तरह का गाना सुनती हूँ. और जाहिर है वेस्टर्न म्यूजिक भी मैंने बहुत सुना, तो जो कॉन्सर्ट्स वगैरह किए वो ज्यादातर उसी तरह के गाने थे. बट हमारी मौसीकी का एक एक उसका एक इफेक्ट है या उसका एक असर है, जो मैंने अपनी टॉक में भी बात की थी.
जी.
रागों की अगर हम बात करते हैं, उनका एक फाउंडेशनल उसकी तासीर होती है, उसका असर होता है. और वो आपको बिल्कुल महसूस होता है जब आप वो गाने सुनते हैं. तो जाहिर है, as you kind of grow older, when you start really like delving into this kind of music, so I felt like, I wanted to understand कि वो आवाज के जरिए इस तरह का इमोशन, वो एक तो फील क्या कर रहे हैं, that they're able to actually transmit and release this kind of emotion, right? So I felt like वो मुझे अंग्रेजी गानों को सुन के नहीं महसूस हो सकता था, जो मुझे हमारे मशरकी गाने जिसको कहते हैं उनको सुन के मुझे एक एहसास होता था कि वो वाकई में वो दुख दर्द वो किस तरह आप बयान करते हैं थ्रू दी आवाज
Yeah.
एंड थ्रू द वॉइस. एंड ऑफ कोर्स उसका एक सिस्टम ही अलग है, सुरों का सिस्टम अलग है, ताल का सिस्टम अलग है. तो I obviously again I wanted to learn, so I looked for a teacher, and God was very kind and that I found my teacher. And with him and his father Ustad Sami and my teacher Rauf, they both have taught me so much more than music, so it's really they've taught me how to be a better human being, how to even understand my own self. मतलब एक टीचर जो होता है वो, इससे अच्छी क्या बात हो सकती है कि वो आपको बताता है कि वाकई में आपके दिल में क्या है, तो वो एक असली टीचर तो वो होता है जो
Yeah.
आपको इतना अच्छी तरह समझ सके कि वो आपकी पर्सनालिटी, आपकी तबीयत, आपके अंदाज, आपकी लर्निंग एबिलिटी के हिसाब से चल के आपको सिखाएं, राइट? ना कि वो आपको सबक दें क्लास, आई
Right.
डोंट PhD लेवल का, जबकि आपका वो लेवल है ही नहीं. So I think, and of course, maybe I was interested and passionate, and I was patient that I stuck to it, and मैं मेहनत करती रही. And I will say कि मुझे time लगा, मैंने इतनी जल्दी इसको नहीं सीखा, और अभी भी मैं कहूँगी कि मैं सीख ही रही हूँ. और ये मेरे लिए आई थिंक उम्र भर की मेरी एक जुस्तजू है कि मैं सुर को किसी तरह से परफेक्ट करूं. आई थिंक I'm never happy with whatever performance that I do. Never happy, because I'm always like, oh, I messed up here. I didn't do this right. Because एक अंदर से आपको एक जुस्तजू है to just strive for this sort of perfection. I'm not
Perfection.
saying we'll never get it, but as long as that learning is there, and I think that really motivates me. And with my teachers, I've noticed that just it keeps me motivated to learn more.
You know, in what you were saying, I think there's so many important lessons in even what you just said there, because that perception, taking that as, because this perfectionism can be very detrimental to the soul. To be able to execute and to be able to put stuff out there is very difficult, especially if you're putting it in the public eye. Or agar wo
बिल्कुल.
aapke andar, and this is a
It's not
perfect
easy.
segue into Yaqeen. Um, and if you don't have that, and you're not able to change the perception, and especially if you look at it in a macro scale of ye saal kaisa guzra hai, because
Hmm.
this has been a year where no one could have anticipated कि ये हो क्या रहा है हमारे साथ, right? Like getting um, the lockdowns to flights canceled to all of the different things that have
So
happened.
many people that have passed away,
Yeah,
that we've lost,
it's
this.
unsurmountable, the amount of uh, pain and things that people have suffered. So
बिल्कुल.
still being able to understand कि you know what, इस पे हमारा कंट्रोल नहीं है, ये किसी और ने लिखा है और ये होगा and हो गया. But the only thing that we can change is that perception and the fact that you're learning from it and you're growing from it, right? Um, because that's the way you're able to move forward. वरना फिर आप अपने आप को जो है ना close mindset में रखते हैं, and then you're not able to kind of you get crippled basically.
Yeah,
And it's
bilkul.
such an important lesson, this perception.
And I think ye bhi, I've generally mostly been uh, a more of a critical sort of thinker, I would say. Critical. I'm not going to say cynical, I'll say critical. I'm being nice to my own self.
That's what I was gonna say.
um,
It's critical to yourself, not to others. It's to
no,
yourself.
no, critical to myself, but also generally towards a lot of things. I'm saying, my perspective when I was obviously in college, I was a lot more cynical, is what I was going to say. um, कि हाँ गाने से क्या हो सकता है, how can it change the world, या इस effort से क्या हो सकता है, ultimately what's the point of doing anything, for instance,
Yeah.
right? Because at that time you're always trying to see कि you'd want to contribute to the world, और क्या वो चीज़ है आप करें अपनी जिंदगी में जिससे सबसे ज्यादा आपके इर्द गिर्द लोगों को फायदा हो, मतलब आप इस तरह की चीजें, जाहिर है आई होप कि लोग सब इसी तरह ही सोचते होंगे. But I think कि over time I realized कि आप cynical होना आसान चीज है,
Yeah.
नेगेटिव होना आसान चीज है, मुश्किल वक्त में होपफुल रहना वो बहुत मुश्किल है.
That's a test.
और वो टेस्ट भी है, और वो आपको एक्टिवली अपने ऊपर काम करना होता है. वो ऐसे नहीं होता कि एकदम से लोग बस पॉजिटिव हो जाते हैं. आपको अपने आप को अच्छी चीजों के बारे में, यू मस्ट बी ग्रेटफुल फॉर द थिंग्स दैट यू हैव. यू मस्ट ट्राई एंड लुक फॉर अ फ्लिप साइड, बिकॉज अल्लाह ताला ने हर चीज में बुरा और अच्छा दोनों
Completely
चीजें
agree. Yeah.
उतनी ही रखी हैं, right? So I think sometimes, as someone, when I was younger, would tend to maybe like be more cynical, is what I'm saying. But I think as my music has also taught me to be a lot more accepting even of the bad that there is, which I think again it teaches you so much about life ke, अगर मेरा बुरा सुर भी लग रहा है तो वो मैंने ही लगाया है, तो मैं उसी को अपने आप को उसके लिए दरगुजर करूं या माफ करूं या एक्सेप्ट करूं और कहूं कि चलो आगे मैं बेहतर करूंगी. इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि मैं कहूं हाँ मैं इसी तरह गाती रहूं. बट उसको ऑब्वियसली आप उसको बेहतर करें, आपका मकसद यही है कि आप बेहतरी की तरफ जाएं.
Completely. So yeah, this is a perfect segue into Yaqeen. Tell me about how this song came to be. क्योंकि लिखा भी आपने, compose भी आपने किया है.
जी.
And this is the first time you're on Coke Studio as a singer and you're doing this. But also you were working on strategy for Coke Studio. So I actually want to hear a
जी.
little bit about that, as well as to how this season came to be, and then and your song as well.
तो मतलब अगेन आपको जिंदगी का कुछ पता नहीं होता, राइट? व्हेन दिस ईयर स्टार्टेड I had joined Coke Studio season 13, which is what it was being called then. And us waqt, I was in charge of the research and strategy, and that's what Ruhail had hired me for. And of course, he knew that I was also one of the backing vocalists in a previous season.
Mhm.
तो when he had, when I'd met him for work, तो उन्होंने मुझसे पूछा था कि तुम क्या करना चाहती हो, तुम्हारा इंटरेस्ट, बिकॉज मेरा अगेन इंटरेस्ट दोनों जगहों पर है, प्रोडक्शन साइड इस पे भी है एंड गाने की तरफ भी है. तो उन्होंने कहा कि तुम बैकिंग वोकलिस्ट के लिए इंटरेस्टेड हो, you'll have to pick one thing, because this is a full time commitment. And एक चीज तुम बताओ. तो because I was more interested to learn something new, so I said I'd want to like be part of the production team, and I'd like to join you on that. So then we started planning this season, and it was supposed to be a multi-producer format. It was supposed to be a much bigger season. A lot of different producers were supposed to be on board, and we were like, we would sit every day and plan out long sessions on how this was going to happen, and the different sort of themes that we were going to explore, and the behind the scenes of it. And like we were fully ready to like record in, I think, June or something, pre-production
Yeah.
isi tarah plan ho rahi thi. And suddenly just COVID happened, and I mean the whole
Typical.
project shut down. Everything shut down. Coke was like, हमें पता ही नहीं है कि हम कोक स्टूडियो होगा भी है कि नहीं, राइट? तो हम लोग तो ऑब्वियसली घर पे बंद, एंड उस वक्त ऑब्वियसली बड़ा मतलब it was a very stressful
Yeah.
period. But of course, I, as part of the team, was engaged with Ruhail in that period. एंड देयर वाज डिस्कशन कि अगर करना है कोई सीजन तो वो कैसे होगा, तो डिस्कशंस हो रही थी, ऑडियो एल्बम होगा, आईफोन पे वीडियोस शूट होंगी, किस तरह से, and he was very kind enough, Raheel is really gracious like that. He taught me how to use this specific recording app जिस पे आप demos वगैरह record कर सकते हैं. And of course, before this, so during our strategy and stuff, when there would be like a sort of jam session, I would also contribute because मुझे, उसका गाने का भी और उसका म्यूजिक का भी शौक है, तो मैं बैठ जाती थी. तो when he would play and stuff, तो Zara और Ruhail ये लोग jam करते थे, तो I would start to contribute or I
Right.
would sing along. So I think it is that time that he started picking up कि she's very interested in also singing और उसको शौक भी है. And of course I'd been learning classical music as well, so I would contribute कि अच्छा ये राग है, इसकी इस तरह की वो है, तो I would obviously make my contributions. तो उनको अंदाजा ये हुआ. और फिर ड्यूरिंग कोविड, he would ask me to like share some ideas कि हम क्या कर सकते हैं possibly. And so I would exchange my ideas through this app, and had like a mic stand at home and would record stuff and send it to him. And so again, we were planning for whenever the season was to happen. We had no idea what was to happen. कुछ अंदाजा नहीं था. We were just kind of exploring कि आगे क्या होगा. मुझे तो ये भी नहीं अंदाजा था कि if I would ever even be a part of it. And then just one day he just kind of called me and said कि I'd like to produce a song for you and you should be one of the artists for this season. I was like, what?
I love it.
Are you sure? So yeah, so I was like, he's like, what do you think? Would you be interested? And I was like, under se, I was like, yeah, oh my God, what do you mean? I'm like, yes. Matlab, obviously. But yeah, I contained my excitement and said कि नहीं, मैं आपको सोच के बताती हूँ. नहीं, मजाक करी. मैंने ऐसे कुछ नहीं कहा. मैंने कहा जी बिल्कुल, I'm very much interested. तो खैर फिर उस टाइम पे I have been writing a lot of my own music and poetry, and because I've been learning Eastern classical, so I've been exploring compositions through the raga sort of melodic
Got it. Okay.
framework. So that is what I was experimenting with on my own, and I'm generally matlab, a bit of a personal, like I'm private person, and I'm also a little shy. So मैं हर दफा शेयर नहीं करती ज्यादा चीजें ना. मैं अपनी चीजें लिखती रहती हूँ, खुद ही करती रहती हूँ, बट उसको ज्यादा पब्लिक नहीं करती, बिकॉज एक अपने ऊपर एक शायद वो नहीं होता, या इतना आप वो फील नहीं करते कि आप रेडी हैं अभी. तो बस फिर उस टाइम पे आई शेयर्ड अ कपल ऑफ आइडियाज विद हिम, एंड जारा भी थी, और जारा के साथ भी मैंने शेयर किया. And they both really liked the idea of Yaqeen, and especially the fact that I had written it myself and composed it myself, and of course, and then it just kind of went on from there. I mean, it just they both really, of course, helped me. Ruhail did the whole arrangement, and beautifully arranged, and a lot of it was his vision on how to treat the song. But I mean, I couldn't have asked for anyone better. I mean, the way he's envisioned it, and it suits my personality, my style. मतलब उनकी तो जितनी तारीफ करें कम है. Zara ने इतनी, she really kind of helped me with it, and so it just became into Yaqeen. और है इम्तिहान राहतों के
it's such a beautiful song. Like, for me, not just the way it's put together, the lyrics, I think, especially in this day and age, are super important. And for me, just the groove of that whole song. Like, I messaged you when I heard
Yeah.
it, and I was like,
I love
this
that
is
analogy.
just, it's like what I told you was like it reminds you of Steve Jobs walking barefoot in India, like watching him and just imagining him. It's just so cool. And
I
coming
love that
and
analogy.
all of that coming together, because मैंने ये वाली राग तो मैंने सुनी नहीं हुई थी, like, and I'm starting to learn more about rags and all of this stuff as I'm kind of speaking to you guys and getting to interact with people like yourselves and who are teaching me. And so listening to Yaqeen was just, it was fascinating on so many different levels. It's such a beautifully composed song. It's such a beautifully produced song. I
Mm.
loved it. I honestly loved it, and it just
Thank you.
the whole groove is awesome. So actually, Wajiha, I have a question.
Hmm.
Around classical music, alap का मतलब क्या होता है?
A lap is usually the beginning part of the classical piece, जिसमें आप राग को अभी आहिस्ता आहिस्ता बयान कर रहे होते हैं. So intro part है. It's usually like a very slow sort of extended notes of the rags. और आप उसको अभी जिसे कहते हैं ना कि अभी आप तैयारी कर रहे होते हैं to get into the song. A
Into
very
the
slow sort of building of the rag. And then aista say, you set the mood, the tone, and you establish what rag it is that you're going to continue. And then you kind of build on it. तो जो
got it.
initial जो part होता है उसको आप अलाप कहते हैं.
And is there a structure around it? या वो riff होती है बस? However you feel like you want to get into it.
तो अगेन क्लासिकल म्यूजिक का यही आई थिंक उसकी सबसे खूबसूरती यही है कि वो इम्प्रोवाइज्ड होता है एंड दैट्स रियली द गोल आई मीन फॉर मी एज वेल कि आप उस वक्त क्या महसूस कर रहे हैं उन सुरों को किस तरह से महसूस कर रहे हैं उस राग के अपने स्केल के अंदर रहते हुए उसको आप किस तरह से उसकी एक अदायगी करेंगे तो आप that is I think what sorry, what was your question? That's saying
Like, is it I mean, you answered it. It's basically, it's not
हाँ
improvised as much. It is improvised, but like within a scale.
हाँ तो वो तो खैर राग की है ही हुदूद उसकी एक अपनी स्केल ही है but it is generally improvised.
Got it.
I mean it depends on the performer to be honest but usually it's all improvised.
ठीक है. I was just curious
जी
because like this word had come and I didn't have the answer for it, and I had meant to ask
अच्छा
Zara as well, and I didn't, and I completely forgot. I was like, I'm gonna ask
हाँ
Wajiha this.
हाँ
आखिरी सवाल आपसे, which is, what are some of your most cherished memories of Pakistan? कोई बचपन की जो यादें हों जो आप न्यूयॉर्क में थी, जो आपको वापस पाकिस्तान ले आती थी, या जब आप कुछ कहीं भी चल रही होती हैं और आपको वापस पाकिस्तान ले आती हैं? What are some of those things that bring you back?
hmm आई थिंक पाकिस्तान के बारे में पाकिस्तान की मौसीकी मतलब आई थिंक मैं दुनिया के जिस मुल्क में हूँ थिंक न्यूयॉर्क में मुझे इसका बहुत ज़्यादा एक्सपीरियंस और अंदाज़ा हुआ कि वहाँ पे एक बड़े मज़े का एक ढाबा होता था पंजाबी दिल्ली के नाम से or it was like this established sort of in the East Village, this
Yeah.
established spot where a lot of cab drivers and all used to go. It was owned by Sikhs there, Punjabi Sikhs. So, when we go to that place for their food, there would always be Nusrat Fateh Ali's Qawwali playing. And, just hearing Qawwali somewhere outside of Pakistan, I don't know what it is, but it just does something to you and suddenly you're just like, oh my god, yes, our music is so cool. So I think that's something that I've definitely always kind of resonated with कि हमारी हमारा कवाली जो है म्यूजिक आप दूसरों को भी जब देखते हैं एंजॉय करते हुए आप सडनली एक आप में होती है कि यार हमारा कितना मजे का म्यूजिक है कितने कूल है हम.
I love
बट
that.
खैर आपने बचपन की वो बात की थी बचपन की भी मैं यही कहूँगी, मेरी अपनी मेमोरीज जो हैं सबसे फॉन्ड मेमोरीज म्यूजिक के साथ जुड़ी हुई हैं। आई रिमेम्बर कि स्कूल में मेरा जब होता था म्यूजिक क्लास होती थी, मेरी फीमेल म्यूजिक टीचर्स होती थी इन स्कूल। अब तो म्यूजिक शायद लेसन्स स्कूल्स में वगैरह में देते भी नहीं हैं, प्राइवेट स्कूल्स, यू नो, इट्स वेरी लिमिटेड।
Yeah.
बट एट दैट टाइम we had music lessons, and I had two really cool female teachers. And in fact, I'd like to even take their names. There was one Miss Kulsum and Miss Rabia. And they both, you know, were like the coolest female like musicians. Ek keyboard bhi bajati thi. And of course, matlab, I was, I think, probably like 7, 8 years old. And that would be the most fun, exciting sort of time for me. I think so in school. Even though I loved school, I was like a nerd like that. But generally, मुझे बहुत मजा आता था अपनी म्यूजिक क्लास में. तो वो जो मेरे ऊपर असर उनका भी, उन टीचर्स का भी रहा है ना. To see someone, they were so loving and so kind and so encouraging, and you know, so I used to like really look up to them, and I was really inspired by them.
Amazing. Wajiha, thank you so much for taking out the time
Mm.
and being with us today.
Thank you, Amar. Thank you for having me.